watching this about, the failure of Oregon's Measure 110 and its decriminalization effort with drugs just has me. By the way, please don't. Like the typical American reaction is to something like this is always, oh, you want to use drugs? Man, I haven't fucking touched anything in years, and I have no interest in doing it. Leave me alone. I, and I don't want to be, so fuck off, with that bullshit. But no, the thing about Measure 110, is that I was here. I lived through it. I watched it. I watched the backlash movement to it begin and start, and what people were saying, and they were calling it an open air drug market and all this other stuff that they were saying about the whole thing, and it really. Yeah, they were saying that about the whole thing, and my authentic reaction to it is just, there was a growing public backlash to the policy, and the voters soured on it, and they soured on it for a reason. I mean, they didn't expect to go downtown and, you know, uh, how should I put it? They didn't expect to go downtown with their kids and, essentially be confronted with somebody shooting up, or smoking heroin on the street corner and everything. They were a little bit stunned by that. Nobody felt safe anymore downtown. They felt very threatened, by the use of these drugs. Oh my god. They yeah, that reaction, that sorry, but that state of things really shocked a lot of these people, and the genuine reaction is, like, why did they recriminalize? Well, it's like, because you scared the shit out of people. You created a situation where people felt, uncomfortable going downtown. It hurt business downtown. It did all that, and people weren't going to tolerate that. But I just wanted to say that, everybody's oversimplifying. They're all like, you didn't actually copy Portugal's policies. Portugal forced people back into rehab, and it's like, yeah, I mean, there are some very key differences between what we did and what Portugal did that, ended up being pretty pivotal. But the more that I've learned about this, the more that I realize that, one thing that would have made things a lot better is if you required people to get off the streets, if there was a mechanism to force people that were using, on the street corner into the buildings. If we look, I mean, Canada is a country that is pretty much as diverse as our own, and has tried to be a melting pot as well of a nation, and in some respects done a better job of it, being inclusive of minorities. But they had a they've had this place called an Insight, and Insight is a supervised injection site that people go to use, these drugs and everything, in a place where there are people that will care about them and will look after them and take care of them if they overdose and everything, and give them what they need. And there are medical staff that involved that, basically watch them shoot up these drugs that they've bought from elsewhere and brought into the facility, and it's been shut down by the RCMP 6, 7, 8, time, like a bunch of times, and every time the building just gets reopened with somebody with a crowbar. Eventually, it made its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and what happened, and the Supreme Court came down not pretty much unanimously in favor of Insight, who they said was doing remarkable good, and everything, and it had encouraged people to get off of drugs and everything. It had gotten some people decided after going there to stop using. It had provided real hope to these people who had been deprived of it for a very long time, and it had done remarkable amounts of good and everything. And it had practiced the harm reduction model of over there, and they were impressed. They were stunned by the amount of public good it had provided and everything, and were just absolutely scathing against the government's efforts to crack down on it. And they prevailed overwhelmingly in the Canadian Supreme Court, who shot the government's efforts to shut it down pretty much for good. And I look at what happened here and what other people have said about it that have looked at it, and it's like, well, you need to get these addicts off the streets and inside somewhere, safe for them, but also, that people, you have to balance the interest of people who just with the addicts, with people who just want to be able to take their kids downtown, without, stumbling into some homeless person that's smoking heroin on the corner of the street and everything. Like you have to do both, and that requires getting people off the streets and into buildings, getting them inside, and and I don't know, maybe Portland needs more construction to do that, but there was a massive backlash in Portland because of that. I mean, people were calling it an open air drug market. They were appalled by the state of things, and I can't say I blame them entirely. I just, the thing that grips me is that there never would have been a good time for this. The guys reacting like, oh, the murder of George Floyd happened, the Minnesota burned the police station down, we had attacks on ours. Like, I'm sitting here like there never was gonna come a good time to vote for something like this. It never was going to happen. I mean, there's always chaos. There's always going to be some pretextual justification for, why the drug war has to keep going and why, you have to keep participating in it. There's always something, going on politically that's quite charged and has turned everything into a powder keg. This country has been a powder keg for years and years and years, just waiting to go off. It's not new. It's been that way for off and on for almost as long as I've been on this planet. So them saying Measure 110 failed because we didn't copy it. Yeah, but there were other things we could have done with this one, and on top of just forcing people to go to rehab.